we more than likely should get going. So I will start with this lovely script that I have. And so here we go. As chair of Division 2 of the House Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67 and the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This public meeting is pertaining to the Department of Safety. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by the Zoom platform or by telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. The notice for this meeting complies with House rules and RSA 91A. Anyone who has a problem accessing the meeting should email lba_fiscal@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. LBA staff are on the meeting assisting us. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their name, states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So Representative Lynn, if you would call the roll, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Bucco.
Yes, I'm present. I'm at home in Conway and there's no one else in the house.
Thank you. Representative Danielson is not present. Representative Heath.
Mary Heath here in Manchester, New Hampshire at my home, and I'm here all by myself.
And I'm Bob Lynn, and I'm present at my home in Wyndham. My wife is here in the other room, but I'm here alone. And Madam Chair, just to remind you, I'm going to have to leave at about 11 because I'm going to Gordon McDonald's swearing in up in Concord.
No problem whatsoever.
Thank you. Representative Murray.
Kate Murray is here in Newcastle with my dog, and by now you can probably guess where my husband is.
Thank you.
In the basement.
Representative Petrie.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Lynn. I'm Joe Petrie in Farmington. The wife is hanging around the halls again, but the dog's in detention. It ate my trackball.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Umberger.
Yes, I'm here at home in Kearsarge, New Hampshire, and my husband is someplace in the house. So,
Right. Thank you.
okay. Thank you all for being here today, and I think we should turn it over to Commissioner Quinn and Steve Lavoie out of safety, and we'll let you go ahead.
Well, good morning, Representative Umberger and honored members of the legislature. I wanted to thank you for the time you gave us last week. I know there was some follow-up questions and some additional information that you were looking for from safety as we looked at some of the gaps that we had. And I know that Steve has been, diligently, he started working on it the minute the call ended. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let him start, and then we'll be open for any questions. So good morning, Steve. And I am alone in my office in Concord, and Steve is alone on the first floor in his office.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Colonel Quinn, that you're alone.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Steve Lavoy, Director of Administration. So I thought that, it was nice meeting with you again. I thought as follow-up, we would just go through some of the materials that we provided the committee. And I'll pull those up if I can. I'll share my screen and we can go over each item, however briefly, answer any questions that you might have there. And then if there's time, maybe we can discuss some of the items in House Bill 2 that impact safety, because there were some that came up. And we can obviously answer any questions that people have at that time. So I'm going to start with So I'm going to start with the memo, which we have here. So there was a question about facilities, and we do have a mix of owned, rented, and leased facilities that we operate across the state. Those are used by all of our divisions. The largest number of facilities are operated by state police, and then also DMV. DMV has the largest number, state police has the largest number of owned facilities. And we provided the following document showing the list of those facilities.
So, Steve, are those facilities, I know they were owned by safety, are they also funded, all of the maintenance and so on, by safety?
Yes, yes. So can you see the listing now on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so the column here that says Department of Safety, those are owned and maintained exclusively by the department. So when we talk about our facility maintenance budgets and reductions that we have, they're impacting all these facilities. That includes the warehouse and automotive garage in Concord on Hazen Drive. We have a DMV motorcycle rider training warehouse garage behind the DMV on Hazen Drive. There's the Fire Academy buildings down on Smoky Bear. So there's an admin building, the dorm, there's a fully functioning firehouse, and then also a storage facility. And then we also have the Fire Academy North facility. So that's up in Bethlehem. There's a classroom and there's also a storage building up there. I did not include fire apparatus in this list. So there are burn buildings that we use for training. That's not included here. I kind of treat those more as equipment. But for our purposes of maintenance for facilities, they were excluded intentionally. Marine Patrol headquarters in Guilford and Marine Patrol storage in Belmont are both buildings we're responsible for. And then we get into the troop stations. So all the troop stations, with the exception of B, are owned and maintained exclusively by the Department of Safety. Troop B, if you see, is actually, it's a joint agreement we have with the Department of Transportation. And so we have an MOU, and there's certain expenses that they're responsible for and certain expenses that we're responsible for. So we have some funding responsibility, but it's not exclusive. Then we have the state police hangar, the gun range, both state police facilities, and then the DMV in Dover is the only the DMV that operates exclusively for with safety. The next column is administrative services. So DOS headquarters, 33 Hazen Drive. If you think of the Department of Safety building on Hazen, that's a DAS facility, as is the DMV headquarters on Hazen Drive. So those are both owned and operated by administrative services. We pay rent to them, and part of that rent includes reimbursement for maintenance that needs to happen on those facilities. We'll work really closely with admin services to to identify projects that need to be completed, and especially long-term projects. So it's like, for example, we need to replace all the carpeting over in the DMV facility in the last biennium. And that was a long-term project we worked with administrative services on that they funded, but we helped to direct in some regards. The IPOC down in Smoky Bear, that's where Homeland Security is, the Emergency Operations Center, the Fire Marshal's Office, 911, State Police. The other tenants there are DOT. So the Traffic Management Center is operated out of that facility. That's a DAS facility. The Emergency Communication Services Garage in that area is a DAS facility, as is the Laconia building up on the old school campus. 911 operates out of that area, but it is technically a DAS building. Although in all these cases too, we do work closely with the Department of Administrative Services, and we've been known to help address shortfalls they have in their budget if there's an operational need that we have. So it's a good collaboration. The other DAS building is the Milford Courthouse. So the courts, the DMV Milford location operates out of the new Milford Courthouse. And so that's another area that we don't have direct responsibility for, and that's a rental. The bottom locations, the DMV Keene through the DMV Gorham, these are all leased spaces. So we have contracts with vendors, we lease the space. To establish a new space, we typically need some fit up costs. It's about $150,000, maybe $200,000, depending on the location, to get it into the working order for DMV purposes. But these are our leased facilities that we have agreements with moving forward. So that's our entire listing. The first column are really those that draw on the maintenance costs that we're asking for in our budget. Everything else to a lesser extent. And obviously with the leased spaces, there's very little that we're responsible for aside from computers and networking and those types of things. If there's no other questions on this item, I'll move on to the position listing.
I think we have a question, Steve.
Sorry, I didn't see it. Representative,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. That Homeland Security building is incredible. I don't know if everybody on our committee has seen it or not, but I had the opportunity to actually work with the National Guard, and when we had a crisis in New Hampshire, and I was just amazed at the organization. How often does that building get used to that extent? Is it just in emergencies, or are there things going on all the time there?
There's things going on all the time there. So the 911 PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Point for Concord, that's one of our 2 locations. They're there 24/7. So that's where their location. All of the Homeland Security staff that operate throughout the year, regardless of an emergency, that's where their business offices are. The Fire Marshal's office, that's where his offices are located as well. It does get additional usage, significant additional usage when there's an activation, and that's where the Emergency Operations Center section, which has separate workstations for each emergency service function, those become activated, and we'll have members from the administrative services procurement team will have a desk, and the National Guard might have a desk, and state police might have a desk, and we bring in HHS if it's public health, all those different components and representatives from all state agencies that have a responsibility to respond. And yes, it's extremely busy in those cases when it's activated, but there is a standard level of operation that occurs because we do have 3 of our bureaus operate all of their activities out of that facility.
Okay.
You know, Representative Heath too, I'll just add in, not only with COVID, but we've made such significant advancements with the technology, with being able to stream video, whether it's from drones or our helicopter. But every event that we managed over the course of COVID, whether it was protest, the issue at the Bow Power Plant, any serious incident, we meet there at the Situation Room, and we're able to manage it from there and actually see live video. And you know, and so you know, unified command takes place there. So more and more, it's going to be getting used more. And I credit Rick Bailey, the other assistant commissioner, with really improving. And Steve's got some capital project he'll be discussing tomorrow to advance the technology there, to actually see, you know, and allow the governor and leadership to see what's going on in the field, which years ago we just didn't have the ability to do. So it's a critical piece of government property. Thank you for the question.
Well, thank you. I think it's just phenomenal what you're doing there.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, Steve, if you would go ahead.
Okay, so the next item here is the position count. And did the screen change? Did you see the position count listing?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Bucco had a question.
No, Madam Chair, the question is on this category that he's going into now.
Oh, okay. Do you want to ask that question now, or do you want to wait?
Well, okay, I'm looking at the 23 unfunded trooper positions, and I'm wondering if they have a dollar amount for those 23 positions. I'm assuming that that's a priority, so.
So that's a great question. I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but I could provide that to you. Those are, just as a reminder, those are 23 trooper positions that were unfunded several biennium ago. So they were not funded in the previous budget. We've been carrying these unfunded positions for a very long time. And so at this point, we're not requesting to have those funded because we have other needs as well. But to show to tie out the full position count to what's in the budget, they're being presented here.
Thank you, Steve.
Would you still like to know the amount of funding those, or is that something that you would not need?
Well, sure. I mean, if you could provide it, easy enough, I guess.
Okay. So that's the total authorized count is exactly that, total authorized positions within the 22-23 budget. As Representative Bucco mentioned, the next column, troopers previously unfunded, those are troopers from previous biennium. They were not funded in 2021. We have not had these resources for several years, and we're not requesting to add these positions at this time, but they're there to show they are authorized, and they'll continue to be authorized into the next biennium and be available for funding if new funding becomes available. The next column is newly unfunded positions in 22-23. So these are the positions that we spoke about as our prioritized needs in our presentation last week. And this lays them out into each accounting unit, division, and the accounting unit number and name to show you where the unfunded positions are. And that's the total of 50 in total, 50 down here in total. These are the positions that we are requesting to be funded if there is additional funding that's available. And we have a separate document that prioritizes these as well as our other needs. So then your total funded count is the last column here. So there's your total funded positions for the year. So for example, if you look at the second line, Financial Management and Planning Bureau within the Division of Administration, we have 20 authorized positions. There's 3 that are unfunded in this budget. So if this budget moves forward as is, there would be 17 funded positions in 22-23. And then we were asked to provide what the funding sources were. And that's what this is here. It's a percent breakdown, general, highway, turnpike, federal, and other. And so in some cases, they're 100% funded by other funds. For example, the first row here, petroleum pollution, that area is funded by environmental services. So that's work we do for the Department of Environmental Services. So that's 100% other. But financial management and planning is an area that is funded by the many sources of revenue we have in the department, or funding sources we have, including general funds, highway funds, and also a mixture of other funds. The one thing I'd like to make sure that everyone understands, we see these funding mixes, and sometimes I want to make sure that everyone realizes, regardless of the availability of funds, we do have some ability to accept, for example, accept general funds and then fund a position that was funded with other positions here. We would do that by changing the mix in a different accounting unit to free up funds in that other area. So I just don't want the committee to think that if there's something in highway or turnpike, well, we know we don't have additional revenues in those areas, but if there are additional revenues in general funds, you'll see we don't have a lot of 100% generally funded activities, but that's okay. So there is an ability to fund these other positions by allowing us to reduce our draws on the highway fund in different accounting units. And we would be happy to make those adjustments if additional funds are available.
Representative Heath, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Could you clarify whether or not those newly funded positions currently have anybody in them?
In this column, the newly unfunded,
Yes.
yes, there's 9 positions of the 50 that currently have that are currently filled.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may, one more question, please.
Certainly.
Do you have a maintenance of effort for all the various funding sources that you have to sustain?
Can you define maintenance of effort for me?
Because there are federal dollars, often there's an amount of money that this has to be from the general fund or state funds to balance.
Understood.
So it's
Yep.
maintenance of effort.
Yep. So in some of the federal funding sources that we have, it's a matching requirement.
Okay.
Not specifically in MOE, but there is a matching requirement in some of the federal highway monies that we receive through NHTSA, and then also through the NCSAP grants that support commercial motor vehicle enforcement. And so those matching funds are built in throughout our budget, so that we typically match those expenditures with highway funds. And so that does provide kind of almost a sunk cost to us for those highway funds to maintain the existing federal fund levels.
Madam Chair, if I have one more quick question, just
Certainly, no problem.
thank you. Are any of those funds at risk because of the current proposed budget?
No.
Thank you.
Representative Murray, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Since some of these positions come from multiple, they're funded by multiple sources, can you just walk me through how you determine what you're going to put where? I mean, you have control more or less over the highway fund, but this one of financial management, some of it is general, some of it is highway, some of it is other. How do you stretch that out with the monies that we give you? Does that make sense? I'm not sure I'm asking it correctly.
No, I think that makes, yeah, I think I understand the question. How do we determine what percentages we're charging are appropriate in those different funding sources? So that's really an area that, for the most part, is not exclusive to administration, but that's what we're looking at the top of the list. We take information about the services that the Financial Management and Planning Bureau provides to all the divisions in the department, and we develop a weighted average calculation looking at the number of invoices we process for state police, for all those different areas. We look at the revenues that we collect and book, the facility maintenances that we perform, all those different components, and develop a weighted average, and then utilize that to allocate our funding as justification to help support that.
Quick follow-up.
Certainly.
Thank you. do you change those weighted averages based on, say, need of one particular position over another position in order to make sure you have money for that? Or are your weighted averages really tied to the usages of those positions?
So they're tied to the activities, not the position. So it's based on volume of work that's done.
Representative Lynn, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. And it's really along the same lines of as the question that Representative Murray asked. And I'm just sort of wondering, is it possible, and if so, do you do this, or would it make sense to do this since you have this ability to sort of move, monies or positions from being funded a certain percentage by one category of funds or another? Would it make sense to try to do a reallocation in a way that sort of prioritizes, in other words, so that the positions or the activity that you regard as the most important, and then in a sort of declining, level of importance, were funded by the most secure source of income, and then, kind of reducing that as the level of priority reduced. I'm not sure if that's very clear, but do you get sort of the idea that I'm talking about?
Yeah, very clear, and it's clear because that's what we've done. So essentially, that's the approach that we took. It was not limited to positions because we were looking at the budget as a whole, because there are operating costs that drive those decisions also. We need positions. The best example I can give you is a trooper without a cruiser can't perform trooper duties. So if I have a body and no car, I might as well not have the body. So when we looked at it holistically, we've made several adjustments to our funding sources because of those issues, because we had weaknesses in general funds and highway funds, and it was prioritizing those services, those public safety services that we felt were the most important, the highest priority, and kind of working our way down from there. Now, that ability is the same ability that we would use in reverse if additional funding were available to us, where then we would look to see, can we almost, I don't want to say undo, but we would reassess where those funds could be used appropriately to fund existing needs, including some of these vacancies. But that's something that we did. I mean, as an example, in administration, when we conducted our internal allocation, our indirect cost allocation to develop these percentages, we added the criminal records area to that allocation, and we had never charged them for services that we provided in the past. But that's a dedicated fund that's healthy. We know people are requesting criminal records. The revenues are in a good spot. They weren't paying their fair share in previous budgets. We re-looked at that, identified that, and now in this budget, they are paying their fair share. So we made some adjustments like that. The other big adjustments had to do with moving entire divisions or accounting units from one source to another. So one had to do with the fire marshal's office, fire safety, and they were funded by general funds, about 2.3 million in general funds in 2021. Because of the weaknesses in general funds, and because we needed to make sure that the entire department was funded, we moved the fire marshal back onto the fire fund, 100% funded, where in the previous year it was only about half general, half fire funds. So we made those adjustments because of the lack of funding in the traditional sources. And while the decision making behind that was prioritizing certain public safety services, including law enforcement, which is a key area for us.
Great. Thank you.
Judge Lynette, those are great questions. And like I said, I want to give Steve, won't take the credit, but I mean, this is a process to get to this point. he has thought outside the box and, knowing there are challenges with the highway fund, cost of collection and the general fund, trying to find the most stable fund is, as Representative Umbarger probably, she's been dealing with this for years, that's the question here. But, we don't have these conversations with Division of Emergency Services Communications 911 because their fund is more stable. But, what Steve and I have said, time and again, is we just want to ensure that the positions are funded. And, he does have the ability to, if, we can secure more general funds to reappropriate it and blend it into this, this mixture to keep the employee employed. So we do have some flexibility there, but it is a challenge, and Steve has done, he's done a magnificent job getting it here. But again, we don't care where the funding comes from as long as we get it.
Sure, no, I appreciate that, and I agree with you. I mean, it sounds like this is really a monumental task to kind of do that, and I applaud you for your efforts in that regard, Steve. So thank you.
Thank you.
And
Commissioner Quinn,
Yes, ma'am.
Steve mentioned that you have 50 new unfunded positions this time. Do you have a priority list of those positions? Or I know they're probably all priority, but
No, we do. We do, ma'am. And I know Steve can, he's prepared to share that. And out of the 50, nine are filled. And how did we get to that list of priority? I mean, we didn't just do this in a vacuum. I mean, we've been dealing with all 7 directors, understanding the needs. But what we've tried to do is look at it from a department level. In other words, we want to make sure when Steve started this, sharing some of these DOIT costs, is we didn't want to have one division, succeed and have 6 others, so we tried to look at balancing the public, the impact on the entire department. So to answer your question, yes, we do. We have a list of priority needs. The lab is right at the top, and Steve he can speak to that in better detail.
yeah, we do, and that's a document that that we've shared with you, and we have that as the next document if you'd like to go through. I mean, it's a large list, and I don't know if you want us to necessarily go through each position separately, but at least we can, maybe I'll give you an overview of what it looks like, and you'll see what our priorities are. But I think before I share that, I just want to reiterate what the commissioner said. One, all that hard work that we did, Jocelyn C. Santiago, she runs our Financial Management and Planning Bureau, and she's on the call. I don't know if I can see her or not, but she's really, she's done a tremendous job. This is her first budget. She's learning the Department of Safety. She's relatively new with us, and this is the type of stuff that she's been helping us with and helping us figure out, and she's done a tremendous job. So it's our team here that makes this possible, because it's just so complex. But when we made these decisions and looked at our funding priorities, it always came back to public safety service delivery. And we didn't want to eliminate services, but we realized there would be impacts. And where can we minimize that impact so that maybe there's additional delays, but a service isn't cut? And those were hard discussions, and we really had to kind of dig deep to find those pieces. And that's where we came up with these 50 positions. The prioritized list then took it that next step further, saying, okay, if we could fund some, which are the areas that are higher risk, higher priority for us? Again, to minimize the impact, that assuming we can't fund all of them, let's have the biggest impact that we can with any that could be funded back. So.
all right, Representative Heath, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. So for the 9 people who will lose their positions, will they have other positions, or does this mean that they're out of work?
So,
Can you explain that? Yep.
yeah, so that's a good question. I'll let Steve take cleanup on it. But these are hard decisions to make. And as Steve said, you know, the emotional response would have been to put those as the top 9. But what's in the best interest of the state in delivering this public safety services? So we really looked at that and placed those positions as needed, not looking at, you know, individuals, because that is what I think is our responsibility to the state. However, there are our options, and I know that it's our goal to find options for these individuals. And hopefully our goal is, you know, at the end of this process that, you know, that we'll secure the funding we need for them. So yes, we are looking at more options, but simply to put them 1 through 9 because they're funded is not, that would not accomplish what we're, you know, our responsibility. Steve, what would you like to add to that, please?
Yeah, I mean, everything the commissioner said is spot on. We had discussions with each individual who was impacted, so that they know what we know, and let them know that we can't guarantee anything, but at this stage in the budget, the funding for the position doesn't exist. And we're working with everyone. If there's alternatives for them, if there's vacancies we can move them into, you know, that's an active process that will happen now throughout the budget process. But again, we hope that funding will be found at some point so that it's really a moot point.
Thank you.
It sounds like someone's phone is ringing. Could we ask to please go on mute? I don't know who it was, but it doesn't matter. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
So then the next item to share is that list of priorities. And so what you'll see here is, I'll probably make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. That better?
You and everyone else gives me eye strain, okay?
How's that? A little bit better?
That's better, Steve.
All right, great. So like the commissioner said, like we just mentioned, these are really based on what the service delivery demands are for the state and public safety in the state. This list starts with all of our 50 positions, and then it includes some other priorities at the end. You'll see the first 6 positions here have to do with the lab. So these are criminalists, 2 criminalists in toxicology. Those are our highest priority requests. We also have 2 criminalists in our digital evidence area. And this is an area that's really been a focus for the department and the lab. There's been an increased demand for digital evidence processing. Everything nowadays is on your computer, on your phone. It's just part of much of the casework that we do. So there's definitely a need for this specialty in the lab. And so those are a close second behind the toxicology positions.
Steve, can I add to that? Just so on that digital evidence, just understand this too. We're looking at rolling out this digital evidence project to get cameras, body cameras, cruiser cameras, but we're going to have to maintain all department digital evidence. Think of that. Every photograph from a major crime case, every crash, pictures of evidence. How is it taken in the field, in the cruiser, from the person, and then transmitted, stored, and then ultimately whether it's got to be responsive to a 91A or get to a public defender or to Superior Court or federal court. So huge project which we have underway.
Yeah, and before I go any further, I should probably just show you the sheet and what we have here. So first column is your division impacted. Second column is the priority. And we have the position name or the priority name, a brief description of what the role is and why it's important. And then we have the total cost. So this is salaries and benefits for 22 and 23. And then that's been split up by funding source because I know that that's an area that people were interested in. So general funds, highway, turnpike, federal, and then other. And then if the source of funds for other, if there is an other, we've included that here as well, so that you have the full idea of what the resources are. But again, like we said before, I wouldn't focus too heavily on those funding sources because we do have some ability to address those needs regardless of funding. So fifth, criminal evidence technician. This is really a critical role in the lab if as far as logging and tracking evidence that comes in and then goes, and then the results that go back out. So this has to be done. And if this isn't done by a criminal evidence technician, it will be done by a criminalist. And if it's done by a criminalist, the criminalist can't do actual analysis work. So that's another critical need in that area. And then also a specialty in pattern evidence. So we have 2 vacancies in pattern evidence, and this is one that we would be requesting to fill to meet demands for those services. The next section is the attorney 4 in the hearings bureau. So that's really the lead attorney for all of the adjudicative hearings. This is an area where could the bureau survive without this position? It could, but you're going to have decreases in you're going to have increased caseloads, and you're going to have decrease in the time in the amount of cases that can be completed, and challenges scheduling things timely. And there are some things that have timing requirements, but those we would prioritize. But there is always going to be that increased risk that we don't complete something within a statutory deadline if we don't have all of our positions.
Steve, the other thing too with that, it's important. A lot of things have been put on delay, and sometimes the data you look at based on COVID, whether it's, you know, the drugs coming into the lab, but all of our inspections are auditing on the mechanics and dealers. You're going to see all the things that are starting to come from the courts. Once the courts, the license suspension, the DWI trials, the administrative suspension. So we have to be prepared. This position always existed, and the gentleman who was the number 2 retired. So it's a critical position for Chris Casco in the Bureau of Hearings.
Mm-hmm. The next position this is actually a new full-time position in the DMV. It's a program assistant to oversee the Ignition Interlock program. So that was done by a part-timer in the past. It really requires full-time hours to manage this position. And so working with Director Bilecki, even with vacancies that she has in other areas, this program is critical. And we need this position to make sure that it's continuing moving forward.
That position too, that manages the most at-risk drivers we have, those who have been convicted of either aggravated DWI or DWI second. We've dealt with a lot of fraud with the Interlock. So we're really moving in the right direction, but there's a lot of risk there, and we're trying to move that program in the right direction for public safety.
Mm-hmm. The next is also a DMV position, and that's a licensing examiner. These are the people who issue the road tests to our to new drivers. And again, delays in service are a result if we don't have people able to conduct the driving exams. As it is, there's already delays as we're working through COVID backlogs because there wasn't quite an opportunity to have all those tests happening during COVID. But regardless, there's a general demand for new licensing and testing, and our structure was built for the pre-COVID general demand, and that requires that we fill these positions. Otherwise, there will be delays even after we get through the backlog. The human resources technician in the Division of Administration, this is the risk management position. So this is the position that processes all of our FMLA requests, workers' compensation, ADA accommodation requests. They need to be the subject matter expert for all of these items. And these impact our employees. These decisions that are being made impact our employees on their jobs and on what type of leave they might be eligible for. It's very specific work that requires someone who's familiar with these areas and has a good understanding of the ins and outs of the law. And this is a vacancy right now. So this job is being done by, thankfully, we have someone in our payroll department who used to do this work. And so she's wearing 2 hats right now. So obviously we're hurting in payroll because we have to do these things. And again, deadlines and the such. The next
But
is,
Steve, I don't think we need to go through each one of these.
okay,
We've got the information here, and I can probably pretty much guarantee from the House side that if we're able to get maybe 1 through 5, that you should be happy. But we'll see what happens. But I appreciate the work that has gone into this priority list, and what and how you approached it. I think that is remarkable. And I know that obviously there were very tough decisions that had to be made. And I really appreciate it. So if we could press on to the next area.
very good, thank you. And thank you for the comments. So then the last item that we have is the list of the services currently offered by the DMV. So there are online services that DMV provides across the state. Anyone with internet connection can schedule their appointments, their driver license exams. They can renew their driver license. They can apply for duplicates. They can pay their tickets. So online ticket pay. If it's a plea by mail, they can make those payments. They can issue non-guilty pleas. They can complete motorcycle rider training applications. And then there's also a real ID document checker to make sure that all of the documents that are required, that the individual has them and that they're the appropriate documents. So those services can happen online, but there's certain things that can't happen online, and you need to be in person for your eye exam, which is required to obtain your license. You need to take your knowledge test on site. You need to be on site to take your driving test. And so those are the services that are offered across the list of locations here. We've got the 14 locations, and what we've done, Director Bilecki's really changed how the DMV functions because of the pandemic. And it's really, I think there's some positive changes that have come of that and will likely stay with us, or may stay with us even after we're back to a more normal case. So the DMV has always had a call center. We've really expanded the ability to take calls and help employees by calls at all locations. DMV added a Dropbox function to send paperwork in outside of each area. So secure boxes outside the location. So then the paperwork can be completed and maybe follow up with phone calls and processed after the fact. Instead of walk-in service, which we had concerns about social distancing, the DMV moved to an appointment-based service. And this is something that the customers have really had a positive reaction to. So gone are the days of going to the DMV and hoping for the best and standing in line. Now you have an appointment. And so now at least you can plan your day around that time. Whether this can be maintained throughout the normal course of business as volume increases, we'll have to see. But it's been very well received by the customers at the DMV. And then we've got our knowledge test appointment.
Could you hang on just a second? Representative Murray has a question.
Not so much a question. I need to move to another room, so I'm going to be off for about 3 or 4 minutes as I grab my laptop, but we've got people coming in. It's going to be a zoo, so I need to go to a quiet room. I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
And then you see the last 2 columns show the knowledge test appointments and the road test appointments, and the frequency of when they're offered in our part-time locations up in Colebrook and Gorham. So you can see the DMV really has a good footprint across the state. The intention is to be providing convenient service to all the employees. Out of all the divisions, all the departments in state government, I can't think of another one that has that really impacts this more people than the DMV does. Because anybody with a driver license, anyone who owns a vehicle, they're having some interaction with the DMV. So we're talking millions of people in the state. But this was one of the requests that came up. What types of services are available online? What types of services are offered in person? And how can you obtain your services? And so this chart kind of shows that for you.
Yes, Representative Umberger, I'll just say that, through COVID, we opened up the EOC March 10th. Obviously, commercial truck drivers had to keep delivering PPE. We had to keep moving. And I will say she only closed for 2 days, 48 hours to get things in place. And I got to tell you, the money that's been invested in the DMV by the state has really served the state well. If you look at that Qmatic scheduling system, that's a game changer. We were dealing with thousands of phone calls, a call center that we're trying to staff. Now folks can just go online. What is it you're trying to do? Where do you want to go? It's like booking a flight, and you can cancel it. So it's like I said, there are a few services that you'll always have to do in person, but she has checked the boxes off on all these that Steve spoke of. And we've got 3 that are planned for the future. So I would say that, I said it before, we're going to have one of the best running Department of Motor Vehicles in the country. And I got a call yesterday from somebody out of state that had to do service with the DMV yesterday and said, I can't tell you how impressed I am and how frustrated I am with my own state. So again, the technology is important, but the director's got some good people there working at the counters. And but the technology's been vital to taking people off of phones and getting them back. And as Judge Lynn will know from his days in the Supreme Court with J1, if you look at the advancement we've made with the tickets and the not guilty pleas and paying tickets and everything tied back to that terrible crash in Randolph. And we're moving forward on the state to state, the automation of the exchange of tickets on the passenger side. We have the CDL. So thank you for the support of the DMV, but it's really going in the right direction.
I have not heard any complaints about what's going on at the DMV right now. And I know that over the course of several years, you've really made tremendous progress in servicing the people. And that I think is what safety is all about, is providing the services to the people that require them, and that's important.
Thank you.
Great. And so then the last piece, it's not really a separate attachment. We talked about the forensic lab positions that are 6 of the 9 vacant positions are our top priorities on our list. But we were looking at the total number of full-time positions. That question came up last time. So it's 44 authorized full-time positions. The 9 that are unfunded, there's 2 in talks, 2 digital evidence, 2 pattern evidence, 2 evidence control technicians. There's also an administrative supervisor. So our top 6 requests for funding are the 2 toxicology, the 2 digital evidence, 1 of the pattern evidence, and 1 of the evidence control positions. And the others are on the list. They're just at a lower priority because, again, the approach we took was highest risk services, ask for those to be refunded first, but also acknowledging there's still going to be a delay for services. And we want to minimize that wherever we can. And so that really concludes the additional documents from the follow-up questions that we had from our first meeting. And so I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Yeah, this is just a quick question on, I thought that several years ago we had funded additional positions in the lab because of, we had gotten so far behind in drug stuff, trying to figure that out. So is this kind of reverting back to where we were in the lab, or is this, something else?
Well, I think if we don't fund these 2 toxicology positions, you could argue we're taking a step back because we would start having those same issues that we had previously. There's still going to be overtime money available to help process things, but we're limited by the number of hands and equipment that we have. You need someone to process them. So again, looking at our services, our initial positions being that were vacant, we started with the vacant positions. This is where they were, and said, okay, based on the demand, we're not shutting down drug testing, but we have vacant positions. We have to meet these targets that were provided. There's only so much money. That's where the initial decision came from. That's why they're the first priority for us coming back in, because we always hoped that there might be an opportunity to fund some of these as hopefully revenue projections you typically get better as we go through the process.
Your memory's correct too, Representative Umberger, and I think, Steve, those were 7Ds. And at the time that we added positions back in, we were dealing with significant backlogs on the drugs section side. But with the law changes to marijuana, we're no longer doing analysis on, pipes and, pieces of joints. And so we've really focused on what are the issues today. But back to what Steve said, the evidence, the patent, the firearms, the ballistics, the fingerprints. So we're looking at each section. Where are the backlogs? So they've shifted, it's different today in this next budget. What is she dealing with? And again, it's the fentanyl, the methamphetamine, but equally important, the fingerprint section, doing, whether it's footprints and obviously the DNA section. So we look at, and as Steve said, digital evidence that's going to be something that we can't, fall behind it.
Representative Bucco, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so that to clarify, the top priorities was toxicology 2 positions, digital evidence 2 positions.
Yes.
You can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yes.
Patent evidence was 1, and evidence control was 1.
Yes. Correct.
And I just have a question, a related question about the unfunded administrative supervisor. In your notes, it says that someone else will have to do his job if we don't have that position. Is that a priority too?
So yes,
I know they're all priorities.
Yeah, I know. It is. It's a matter of at that point we look at risk, and so the risk at performing the administrative functions is lower than the criminalist and the subject matter experts. And worst case scenario, a criminalist might have to do some administrative work, but we can never have an administrator doing criminalist work. And so that's why that's lower down in the priorities.
Thank you, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As I said before, I'm going to need to leave now, but I wanted to thank the Commissioner and Director Lavoie for your presentation. It's really been very, very informative and very helpful. So thank you very much. And I apologize that I have to leave.
Thank you.
No, give our best to the new Chief Justice.
I will do that for sure. Thank you.
Okay, I think that, are there, anybody have any other questions? Mickey, is there any questions from people that are watching us?
I see nothing, but I think this would be a good time to have Department of Safety walk through their House Bill 2 sections. There's not many of them, and I think they could just go over those real quick.
I totally agree. There was enough to make me nervous in HB 2, but
Yeah.
it's almost like the bears for Fish and Game, but we'll get to that another day. So, okay, if we could, whomever wants to start HB 2.
Go ahead, Steve.
Mickey, do you have you
want
had
me to share
a
this
summary
one?
document, right?
Go ahead, sorry.
Did you have a summary document of Division 2?
I don't, but I've got the bill. I can share my screen, and I've got them here. So,
Because I thought there was something that was posted on the Division 2 website.
yeah, we put something out that was on the draft document. So
Okay.
We don't
Okay.
really have
Well,
any-
I can talk, and if you want to start doing that, I can start talking a little bit about what's in there.
Okay.
For the most part, there isn't anything that we're concerned about necessarily. There is one area that that would require some action, and so I'm going to start there. In the other areas, we can talk about our understanding of what those new requirements are. But one area is the
You give page number,
establishment of $1 million fund for.
Excuse me just a second. Mary, you had a question?
page numbers, please.
Oh, we're just looking at the document that Mickey put together for us for our
Okay.
meeting on Monday. If that's okay. Hopefully everybody has that in the mix of whatever else they have on their dining room table.
Would it be useful, Representative, for me to share the actual House Bill 2 introduced now that we have it? Because I did that document prior to us getting the actual bill. So I don't know.
If
I do have it here.
you have the language there, that would be great.
All right.
Oops,
Oh,
sorry. Hold on. I had the. All right, can you see, which one are you looking at now?
that looks like it.
Oh, sorry, hold on. I've got too many windows open. Bear with me, everybody. I'm sorry. All right. Third time's a charm. All right. What do
Yes.
you, okay, you got it, B2? Okay.
Okay, so the first item, which is our transfer authority, this is something that's really critical, especially it's been made even more critical because of the additional allocation that we've done in this budget of transferring these costs in 27 and in 64 out into, and property casualty insurance also, out into whichever dedicated funds they belonged to that could absorb those costs appropriately. So this transfer authority is really critical for us because those are typically accounts that we cannot transfer funds out of. We cannot transfer appropriations to or from. And so having the ability to do that in case there's a change in our allocation, we have estimates, we're allocating based on our best information, but that doesn't mean the dollars are going to add up exactly. So we've had this transfer authority for a number of years, so this would continue that. One item for consideration for this committee would be something similar to this transfer authority, but language that would allow us to fund unfunded positions if other positions become vacant throughout the year. That's something I could pull some language together, but what that would do is let's assume that all 50 positions go unfunded in the next budget. There's some of those that are critical, like we've identified. If a vacancy occurs within that area in a service area that we determine is not as critical, instead of hiring for that vacancy, we'd like to hire for the one that was our priority. And so we would need some general language to give us authorization to do so. Otherwise, we can't touch those unfunded positions. So
yeah, Mickey, this has to be done by department.
Are you,
And
the transfer specifically?
no, I'm talking about the unfunded positions, being able to fill them as long as you have money.
Steve knows a little bit more about the specifics of this than I do. I don't see anything in House Bill 2 related to that this time around. I don't know. I think there's just existing authority for that for the agencies.
Well, I thought I saw something in some of Division 1 things, but I have no problem personally adding that to HB2. So if
And I don't think it's anything new. I think that's been essentially boilerplate for budgets now correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but this is a kind of carryover authority from year to year.
Yeah, it is. And the position, the ability to hire positions though has been specific to certain agencies. And so I know that Health and Human Services has that ability. They'll come to fiscal and they'll show which positions are funded and unfunded. We don't, to my knowledge, we don't have that authority. That's not a broad authority given to all departments. And so I would request, if we're not going to be able to fund our positions, if we could get that authority.
Okay, Steve, maybe you can work with Mickey on whatever language we need for that.
Okay.
And Representative Murray, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm assuming if it's in HB2, it would just be for this biennium. Is this something that you would want to consider for the long term, or is this something that it's better to consider it budget to budget?
We'd certainly like a long-term, if we had that authority long-term, that would benefit us. Whether or not it's that's something that could be done in time or in conjunction with the budget bill would be up for discussion. But we would certainly, if this was formalized and long-term authority, we would certainly be welcome it.
Yeah, if I could, I'm not sure that there is any department that has long-term authority on this, Representative Murray. It's something that has traditionally been entered into HB2 as for, whatever happens to be going on financially. But I don't think any of us have any problem of inserting that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next section in HB2 is a new section related to body-worn cameras. And what this does, in summary, well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially this establishes a fund in the Department of Safety to provide grants to local police departments to help encourage them to implement body cameras. And so it's $1 million that's appropriated to start off. And it's a non-lapsing, I believe it's a non-lapsing fund that's established. And this is certainly something that we support in concept. This is a LEACT recommendation that body cameras be in use in law enforcement across the state. This would not directly provide any support for state police. So this is not state police. State police body cameras are within our existing operating budget. This is additional grant funding for locals, kind of as a matching component. This language requires the Commissioner of Safety to work with the Attorney General and establish the administrative rules surrounding what needs to be submitted and who can obtain these funds. And so that would be established. What this does not include currently is any support to administer the program. And so that's the piece that we would request of the committee. We spoke with our grants management area that falls under my division, under Division of Administration. And I can tell you that we're stretched as thin as possible in that area. We have people working on multiple grants, and there's no resources to help get this thing going to where it needs to be. So we would likely, to make this happen, we would need a program specialist 2 position. I was looking at the amounts, but it's about $80,000 a year salary and benefits for that role. And we think that position embedded within our grants management unit, we could utilize the processes that we have for our existing grant distributions, but we'd have that person who'd be responsible for this, because this is going to get complicated fast. Now I don't expect all 200 towns and municipalities with police forces to participate. Some may say we don't want to participate, but I think there will be a large response to this. And so for those of you who are familiar with the compliance of grants and the application process, there's a lot of administrative work. And we think that the best practice is always, if there's a new program, you put someone in charge of it, this person would be in charge of it. So that would be something that's not funded or brought up here that we would also request.
One of the areas that is, sorry, Representative Pease, I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's a quick one. Have you maxed out all your federal funds that might be used for this? And or if we get new funds related to COVID that could be used in this area, would that be a possibility for you?
So we have maxed out our administrative draws for federal funding. So that was the first place we looked. And then as far as the COVID piece, that's a great question. I don't know what the restrictions would be if there is money to states that comes forward, and whether this would qualify. So we would have to look at the eligibility for that.
So Representative Umberger, just to share with you, the one thing that I'm really focused on, and there's a lot of, I would say, nervousness, is our own camera project. And as you know, Steve knows, we've got money in our own budget. We just extended the RFP out because we're looking at other options for downloading, because we've got troopers, you know, in all corners of the state, some with connectivity, some without. So we've got to try and focus on our own project. So this is completely separate. And I am getting a lot of phone calls from folks saying, you know, how would I get money? Can we just share some of your technology? Well, we haven't even got our own, you know, up and running yet. So we're going to have a lot of work over the next biennium, but thankfully, you know, Rick Bailey and Steve and the team, you know, but I've got to focus on Department of Safety and the LEAC, you know, we're mandated. We are going to have body cameras and in-cruiser cameras on uniformed troopers. This is completely separate. LEAC recommended local law enforcement, you know, utilize body cameras, but again, there was no funding. So this is an opportunity. And again, it's, you know, this is just in the infancy stages. But to Steve's point, I agree with him. If this is going to be successful, he's got to have somebody to run the program, or at least assist the grants management team.
One of the things that, as I talked to some of the local folks about body cameras and dash cams, the digital keeping of all these records is going to be phenomenal. And I'm not sure that we have any rules or laws or whatever you want in place to try to handle how long do we have to keep these things? You know, because it's going to be well, I shouldn't say that. It's going to be very difficult for local police to manage this, not only, you know, financially, but in trying to manage the actual digitizing of all of this stuff.
So I have some good news for you, Representative. So Steve will share the statute. There is a statute in place for body cameras, which lays out, you know, defines, you know, retention, you know, whether it's an officer involved shooting or, so that is in statute as of now. And again, you know, whatever company that, whether it's a small department, the departments where all the police officers come and go and share cars, their storage solution can be somewhat different because they've got like a hot swap and it can be done there. But you're correct. It's the storage, and that's what Rick Bailey has been. Why our RFP, we've put so much work into it, and thankfully, you know, Dennis Goulet and Rick and a team, we want to make sure we get it right, because if you're a trooper and you're in Columbia and you've just been on patrol for 8 hours and maybe you've stopped several cars, made an arrest. So how much data is on your cruiser camera and in your body camera, and how do we get it to that secure location? And then from there, once it's there, if you made a DWI arrest, how does it go to the Bureau of Hearings? How does it go to the courts? If you've got a 91A, so it's the storage and the management of this information, because as you know, everybody's gonna, want to get access, and we have to make sure that, and again, we have the right people in place. I believe we'll get there, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands this is a very, very, very big project that we have underway.
I don't, Mickey, could you move the body camera thing up a little bit? Okay, it says that you have to, within 180 days, jointly establish a process for application. And what you're telling me, if I understood correctly, is that that is probably a little bit too soon from your perspective.
No, I don't think, this is just, I think that's establishing the process for application. So I think that's doable. And then from there, once they have the funds, it will be incumbent on the police department. Let's say part of the application is you've got to ensure that, look, you've got a proposal, you've got a defined number of police officers, and you can, let's say you applied for, $100,000. We've got X amount of police officers, we've got a vendor, we can do it. I think, and again, I don't want to overstate it, but I think that is, I think that's doable.
So I
Steve?
think the 180 days is probably it's probably fine to develop the process. I think that we could develop the process in that 6 months. That's 6 months, right? 180 days, 6 months.
Yeah.
I think in months. The days always throw me off. The concern I have is that everything needs to be adopted by rulemaking, and so that's where I think the delay might come in. And so it might make more sense to have this extended out for a year, or maybe at least 9 months, to allow for the rulemaking process. Because I'm assuming we wouldn't want to go through emergency rulemaking for something like this. But again, that would be, the legislature could always decide that, no, that's fine, that's appropriate, we want to go that route. But that's what my concern would be, is the rulemaking piece, maybe holding it up. But I think the commissioner and the attorney general could come up with the process within 180 days without an issue.
The statute too, Representatives, 105-D:2, use of body worn cameras.
Thank you. Are you foreseeing the same vendor that you would tell the police departments that they all should use this vendor so that the information is seamless from the local level all the way through?
So I'm gonna step out on a limb here, and I think that I don't think that is what we would be doing, because like I said, the rules with proposals and the requirements of confidentiality, but we have no idea right now what's going to be the best vendor for our needs. So every department, I think, will have some unique needs, and I think that they will have the ability and flexibility to seek the best vendor for themselves. Maybe it's one that they know, but I think we are just going to provide the resources, but to ensure that I think what's important is, if we're going to fund it, we kind of have a baseline on what the costs are, understanding what kind of some costs are, and making sure that they buy the equipment that we need. Now, like we're looking at body cameras and in cruiser cameras, front and rear. So that'd be actually 3. So a department may just want body cameras, but I think this grant here is would be for body cameras. And again, it's not mandatory. I think you'll see a lot of interest in it though, quite honestly. I think a lot of departments are going to look to us for funding, and I don't know how far the money will go, but I think to Steve's point, I think we can get, I think I will work closely with the next Attorney General to get the process in place. And I think we can do it though. We'll get it done.
Representative Bucco, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, with all this data, are we going to be storing, do we need our own servers, or how are we going to be storing all this material?
So we, the state, will be worrying about the 270 some odd, state police troopers. That's what we will be doing with our project, that we're going to have to fund separately. The local departments will have to do their own. I've talked to many local chiefs that have them now, and there's no issues. They've got their own storage. Maybe some have the cloud, some have servers, but so they'll, I think they'll manage it on their own. Manchester's, gone in their own direction, I know. And some have had them for several years. We're actually behind, many of the departments.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mickey, I think we've had enough on body camera. Let's go to radio infrastructure. This one is really.
So I also just want to make you aware, the way that the bill was drafted, section 145 lumps in the body camera fund as well as the commission established to receive the complaints alleging misconduct. There's no real tie to the Department of Safety with that or the appropriation. I feel like this was a drafting oversight. It probably should have been separate sections. So we may have to coordinate a little bit with Division 1 as far as what to do with this one section. There is an appropriation that is included actually in the Department of Administrative Services budget because it's an independent commission. But just that's why you see that section kind of lumped in between some of these safety related sections. Just wanted to point that out. I don't know if you want to talk to the department about that or just move on to the radio section down here on section 148, or excuse me, 149. I think you're muted, Representative.
Thanks. Does the safety have any input that they'd like to make on that?
No, I understand it. And I haven't been involved with Lee Act. I know what the vision was. So I think Mickey explained it just well, and I'm sure he'll get it cleaned up.
Okay, thank you.
So the next section would be 149 related to the radio infrastructure equipment purchase.
Yeah, so this is an area that we had a lot of discussion with, and this has been an ongoing kind of question across the state for years now. Our Division of Emergency Services and Communications operates the State Police Radio Network, and that network is actually utilized by other departments as well. And so we've been providing services, maintenance of equipment, and to divisions across the state free of charge for a very long time. We haven't had agreements to charge back to different funds. We've always kind of struggled with what's the right model for this? Should we have a separate system that everyone runs their own radio? Should we have a state centralized system? And the reality is that there's a lot of potential for us to gain efficiencies if we work together to kind of have some sort of governance over the state systems. Interoperability has really driven this because that's been the challenge. If you run separate systems, your equipment can't communicate with others. And the more and more we're being asked to operate with a full statewide response, not just a Department of Safety response. And so what this language does is it starts to build that structure around our radio infrastructure and looking at it holistically and acknowledging that it's a statewide system with a statewide response with different needs at the department levels. But we should probably look at the system infrastructure itself as a whole. And this would create would create an opportunity for 911, the Division of Emergency Services and Communications, to work with these other divisions and other departments across the state to identify ways that we can collaborate and be smart about the investments we make within our radio infrastructure to have the biggest and broadest impact possible, and not build a small network to service one department, which inadvertently walled off benefits that could be achieved from others. And I'd turn it over to the commissioner to add any other information that he wants to share about the importance of this, because it's something that we've been talking about for a while, and it's certainly in my opinion, the right way to go.
So I'll just add in 2 minutes. In 2014, I was the colonel and I was involved with a performance audit of State Department of Safety statewide radio interoperability. I have the LBA report here now, and having gone through each one of those, long, short, there was some great recommendations here on, what's the long-term planning, what's the consolidation. I think there was a belief that Department of Safety at the time managed this, super, system of radio interoperability. But as the audit points out, there are so many separate and unique systems. And so the recommendations, I'll just read one line. The state did not have a viable, integrated, strategic radio interoperability plan to provide clear goals and objectives, defining this desired end state for interoperability. Since 2014, over the last, six plus years, we've made some significant advancements at DESC. And this piece here essentially ensures that, similar to like IT oversight and governance, making sure that, agencies, when we're making these purchases, large purchases, there's a process so that they are interoperability. There's not a redundant purchase. And I know that Director Doyle, Mark Doyle, and his team have been dealing with other leaders in state government, looking at some, whether it's capital projects, and do we really need this? Or are there areas where we can combine, consolidate? And so we have continued to look at this performance audit and the recommendations, and I think we've made some advancements. And this is a piece here that will ensure that, in short, where the purchases are needed and necessary for interoperability, and there's no redundant, system or equipment in place now. So, but yeah, so.
Yeah, I do have this question. It says, the department shall annually review and set dollar or other limits for purchases and contracts. And that the director of the Division of Emergency Management before. So this now requires you to review all of the contracts. And one could interpret this to say, since you're setting the dollar limits, then you ought to fund. I mean, I'm just a little concerned about that section 3.
Yeah, and I think.
Go ahead, Mary.
Madam Chair, me?
Yeah.
Oh, again, I'm going to ask my same question. It would seem like this system would fall into maybe something that federal funds could be utilized for. Certainly, when we had 9/11 and then we have emergencies across the state or nationally, this would seem to be something that would be an asset to that, because it would upgrade the system and just have people talking to each other more simultaneously. So could this be a federally funded event or initiative?
So I think it could be if the obviously if there was the use was eligible for those funds, then yeah, it could be. What I think this language is trying to do is is really allow the agencies to have, to be part of the development and the use of the infrastructure around radio, and bring those needs forward, but have a statewide level of review that makes sure that they're going in a direction that continues to be interoperable with our other systems. And so the funding is not really addressed, because I believe the intention is the funding remains with that state agency. And that's where the contracts language comes in. And I can see the confusion there, because it almost seems like we're saying, well, you can't spend more than $2 million on your system. I don't know that that's necessarily the intent. But I'm not 100% certain. My interpretation is it would encourage a discussion to have with the agency and desk, because if desk is having these discussions with all agencies, maybe agency A says we want to replace all of our radios at $2 million. However, agencies B, C, and D are planning to do a large replacement next year, and we can get some synergy by combining those requests. And so that would be an indication of, well, we want to limit your ability to purchase those now because this is happening in 6 months. And so let's add you to this request instead. So that would be the way that I read it.
Makes
The,
sense. Thank you.
the other efficiencies were made, take an antenna anywhere in the state. There can be several state agencies that have equipment on that. Do we have multiple contracts? Do we have multiple maintenance agreements? Do we have, I mean, we broke down this entire system to look and see who has what, where. And again, we're very sensitive that we don't want to take this over, but to ensure that, that we that they understand. And this is similar to language that IT has for IT, purchases. That's where we looked to make sure that the right decisions are being made, the equipment's interoperable, and that we're not paying more than we should for something, and that we actually need the equipment. So I think it shows good, fiscal responsibility. And I think at the end of the day, the more that these agencies work together, I can tell you, Director Stewart from Cultural Resources has worked very closely with emergency communications team, and they have already made significant savings with quick purchases that didn't need to be made. They're working on having them do the maintenance and the upgrades to some of the systems, because they were already there. They're already going there. So the more you talk, the more you see where efficiencies can be done. But again, I know you've got a lot of reading to do, but if you look back to this performance audit that was done in 2014, there are some things here that recommendations that were spot on, and we've been kind of chipping away at them, little by little. But back to Representative Heath, the state has made significant capital improvements to the radio system over the past 6 years, and right now, thankfully, it's in a good place, and we want to continue that moving forward.
Thank you. It sounds like it's a real move to reduce redundancy and could save millions of dollars eventually. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions here? Okay, let's move on to the next area.
I'm not sure there is a next area. I think that actually concludes the direct House Bill 2 sections for the Department of Safety.
Okay, did this capital appropriation repurposing go away?
Yeah, that found its way into House Bill 25, where more
Okay.
appropriately so, because it affected the capital appropriations.
Okay, all right. Is there anything that you would like to see in HB2 that's not there besides the unfunded position?
That's the only piece at this point. I think we're good. There's probably one other piece in HB2. There should be one other piece related to moving the mechanical licensing board over to OPLC. Oh,
Oh, yes. Yep.
That's standard language, just changing where that function resides. So at this time, I don't believe there's anything else that we would be requesting in HB2, just that was unfunded position authority.
Steve, can I just show you, I'm going to share my screen one more time because I've got the HHS section that does that.
Okay.
And just, so right here is, I think, what we were talking about. Take a look at that. So would your request essentially be to be added to that section or have similar section, you know, but to do the same thing?
Yeah, that's on first gloss, that looks like that's the language that we would be requesting.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Mickey.
So that's section 21 for the committee. If you wanted to take a note to look at another time, we could put an amendment in, maybe keep it separate so we don't interact with Division 3 section of reviewing this for HHS, add a new section for safety, or amend section 144 relative to their transfer authority and have two parts to it or something like that.
Okay. And you folks have no problem with the transfer of the mechanical safety thing, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay. So we can tell Division 1 go.
Yep.
Okay. I will make a note of that. So mechanical, yeah. All right. I think that's a good move, by the way.
I think we agree, and we worked closely. The fire marshal worked closely with Lindsay Courtney over at OPLC. We met several times and to coordinate, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, sometimes state government there's so many different functions we have. Things end up getting in places where they don't necessarily belong, and when we can fix them, we want to fix them, and this is a move that makes a lot of sense.
Right. Are there any other questions for the commissioner or for Steve? Okay, I believe that we have you back next week, one day. I'm sorry, I don't remember which day it was, where we will be going through your budget kind of on what we call a line by line basis for the division to ask whatever questions they might have on the funding, what you're looking for. And I'm sure that you saw what came out of Ways and Means and their funding levels. So we'll work through all of that. And obviously we won't be making any final decisions next week, but it certainly will give us an opportunity to see where we are.
Absolutely. No, we'll be happy to go through at that level of detail. And at that time, we'll also bring forward some technical corrections for the committee to review. Things like a change in a revenue source that doesn't have a net impact, but would make it correct due to a keying error. Little small things like that for consideration.
You're muted, Representative.
Thank you. I know Mickey is looking forward to making all of those adjustments. So that'll get him started as opposed to where we are right now. So,
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
So thank you very much. And for the division, today's Thursday. Tomorrow we get to talk to DOT, and we'll see what they have to offer. And obviously, they will probably have to offer up some safety positions to unfund some safety positions. So we'll look at all of that tomorrow and see exactly what they have. Now, they did, I think you all got the package from DOT, and I know that they tend to refer us to to that. So please make sure that on your dining room table, like mine, or wherever, that is available. So I guess I will see you all tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you all.